We are about to deliver a ship from a company called Pony Express on a trip of little more than 1 year. They only have like 5 months aboard when someone makes the ship crash on purpose with an asteroid. Upon leaving the cockpit, the culprit starts to hallucinate with the company mascot. With this sort of hallucinations, it makes you wonder how did he get to be a captain, right? Fast forward 2 months after the crash. The ship's emergency systems managed to keep it from pressurizing into the void. And here we're introduced to the crew. Swansea, a grumpy middle-aged man, the mechanic on board, Daisuke, the intern mechanic assistant, and let me tell you, this trip is not worth the experience or the money. And Hania, the must protect at all costs, sleep-deprived looking, half nurse. And I'm making an emphasis on half because she didn't finish medical school. Or a nursery course for that matter. During most of the game, we take the role of Jimmy, the surviving arrogant co-pilot that we'll learn to hate by the end. They were pondering if they should open the cargo and check if whatever they were shipping was useful to survive. They only had like 4 months worth of food. We get to see what happened to the captain, and I have no idea how this guy is still breathing. Most of his body got completely burned during the crash. They were running out of painkillers to give him, and Anya couldn't stand to give him the medicine now. And Jimmy very reluctantly helps her with that. They were all made to believe that he crashed the ship on purpose, but didn't understood why. Otherwise, they were trying to keep him alive, not just to make him suffer necessarily, but because it was the right thing to do. And Anya still believed that there should be a reason for this. At last, they decide to open the cargo, but before checking it, we are sent back a week before the crash. This is something this game does a lot, and it gets kind of confusing, but don't worry, I'll put all of this in order. This time we take Curly's point of view, taking a psychological test. For Anya, all seems to be in check, but she also adds she didn't want to do Jimmy's test. He didn't take it seriously and ends up with him saying he wants to fuck the company's mascot. And that made her very uncomfortable. Curly says that there was no problem, they were old friends and would make sure he takes it seriously, dismissing Jimmy's behavior. On his part, Swansea was trying to get Daisuke out of the safety foam he got trapped into when he was fixing a vent. All said the ship was barely kept together, companies cutting costs and all of that. He was warned to not try it again, that vent was a severe safety risk. And then Curly boards Jimmy for his behavior. On his way to the cockpit, the hallway begins to stretch and Curly falls on a deep lake of blood. These surreal sequences is how the game tells us how the main characters, Curly and Jimmy, are losing their minds. With the stretching hallway and the pool of blood symbolizing, I think, Curly's anxiety and his constant feeling of imminent dread, or knowing that something bad was about to happen. Or maybe his reluctance to keep doing this job, and later we are slightly hinted that these might be suicidal thoughts, but I don't want this to fall into the stereotype of indie games talking about depression and mental illnesses. Wait a minute, the game is already doing it, oh fuck. He helps with Jimmy's evaluation, and he would discover that he had a tough life back on Earth, to put it mildly, but all things considered he liked being a co-pilot. They had some stability here, and he liked being in control. On Curly's part, he was struggling with the feeling of being stuck in this position most of his life, being the captain of a cargo ship, but they'll have this figured out. Then they get a fax from their boss. I'm not sure if they would use that fax in the space era, but considering how the company is cutting costs, it's very credible, let's be honest. After checking the message, he has another hallucination, although with more symbolism this time, with some old cartoons talking about working rights and a star being swallowed by a black hole, existential dread, exploitative company, what are they trying to tell us here? And the final commercial has the weirdest title drop, a commercial for Mouthwashing. A day later, Curly has to break the news to the rest of the crew. Although he could have chosen a better moment, they were having a party for his birthday. The company only allowed 1 per trip, and after serving the cake, he tells them they were getting fired. By far, the most affected here was Anya. She was really trying to get into medical school with that money, but Jimmy takes it very personal and tries to make Curly feel bad for this, since he was the captain and he thought he was probably getting something out of this, while Jimmy and the rest had to come back to their old lives, and the captain, being as non-confrontational as he is, he says nothing. Hey shithead, blame the sender, not the messenger. I told you, you'll learn to hate this piece of shit. Then we're back 2 months after the crash. The cargo was completely filled with mouthwash, bottles and bottles of it. They sent 5 people on a 14-month year trip just for a disinfectant. While Anya understandably panics, Swansea sees it contains 40% ethanol, which is the equivalent of a strong wine. But I'm just letting you know, Swansea, I'm not sure how your stomach is going to process all of that. A few days pass and Jimmy was awakened by Curly's wails and goes to ask Anya if he has taken the painkillers. He was talking to Swansea in the cockpit. She was crying and couldn't keep eye contact with Jimmy. Swansea is more defensive with him this time. Something wasn't right, and Jimmy notices it. He gives Curly the painkillers, while blaming him for putting them all in this situation, worried about how the rest of the crew were looking at him, how she was looking at him, and forces the painkillers, causing him a lot of pain. Then we're sent into what I can only describe as an hallucination of Jimmy trying to have some cake with his old friend, like his consciousness telling him that they should relax and enjoy these little moments. But Jimmy was so out of his mind by this point that his hatred surpassed his guilt, wanting only to get rid of him with the axe. Back to the present, Swansea and Daisuke were intoxicated by the mouthwash, and Anya was considering on taking a shot. She tells Jimmy that they still had painkillers with him, and lashes out against her when she asks him to give the medicine to Curly. This time, he tells Curly that the weight of responsibility was too big for him, giving him the medicine and feeling genuinely bad for him this time. Or so it seems. Then we see another flashback, 2 days before the crash. Curly talks to Anya in the living quarters. She couldn't sleep. Here she asks a few key things, like if he could see the death pixel on the corner of the screen, or how much time they had left. And she quickly points it down to 8 months. Then she asks him why there were locks at the cockpit and infirmary but not at the dorms. The answer is simple, of course. It was for safety and to cut costs. 2 more months has passed, and Daisuke tells Jimmy that Anya was trapped inside the medical area. But apparently, the door was working perfectly. She locked herself from the other side. She just says that she is sorry, and that Jimmy was right. She had to take responsibility. They had to stop her. And the only way to the infirmary was using the vents that Swansea told them specifically not to use. Swansea was watching the utility room since they crashed and didn't let anyone in, saying only that it was too dangerous. Jimmy knew how to make a heavy drink that put him to sleep, using mouthwash and the painkillers. Not before telling Daisuke he didn't understood who sent him here, and that he felt bad for the kid. Anyways, that drink could almost kill a person, but it was diluted enough to just knock him out. The thing is, why would Jimmy knew how to do this? We're told that he had a rough life back on Earth, and I'm starting to think that he got this job thanks to Curly. Just keep that in mind, let's continue. It turned out that the utility room was mostly fine, but only one cryopod was running. It had enough energy to last at least 20 years. This was the reason why Swansea was keeping them out of here. Anyways, despite the warnings and the clear risk, Daisuke gets into the vent. As expected of a damaged ship, something goes wrong and is severely injured. He managed to open the infirmary room. After waking up, Swansea sends Jimmy to get some mouthwash, and here he's stuck in another hallucination, escaping from a monstrous horse. We later see that this horse is a manifestation of his consciousness and the weight of guilt being too much for him, but let's continue. He got the bottle and tries to apply it, but it had no use. After 6 hours, the bleeding wasn't stopping. Jimmy insisted that he could fix this, but it was too late. And Swansea walks in to end his suffering once and for all, cutting his forehead with the axe. Once again, Jimmy tries to blame this on Swansea, that he kept the cryopod away from them and told Anya God knows what, but Swansea already knew what happened with her. What he did to her. But it didn't matter now. He probably wanted to get Daisuke into the pod, but what gives at this point? He could get into the capsule and wait for help to arrive. It didn't matter at this point. It turned out that, as it was expected, Anya took her own life from an overdose, and Curly was still alive. He witnessed her attempt. In between these transitions, we were taken back 1 day before the crash. Curly was looking for the gun compartment. Anya was at the cockpit having a panic attack. The captain supposed that, since she was the nurse, she didn't have the proper psychological evaluation. She wasn't going to harm herself, she just wanted to take the gun away, because she was pregnant, and Curly knew who was the responsible. The following day, Anya told Jimmy about the pregnancy. He simply left the room. Curly goes to find him, but Jimmy knew what this meant for him. And here Jimmy manipulates Curly one more time. They no longer had this under control, and he kind of understood his position. The thing is that Jimmy manipulated Curly to make him believe that everything was under control, so giving him the chance to crash the ship. He'd rather being dead and taking the rest of the crew with him than facing his responsibilities for abusing Anya. That's the reason why Anya was so nervous around him sometimes, why she asked about the dorms not having locks, and the implication of him knowing how to make a somniferous. But at one point, the guilt was too much for him. That's exactly what we see at the beginning of the game, him having hallucinations about the horse. Curly tried to stop this, of course, but it was in vain. The ship still crashed. He got the blunt of the impact, most of his body was burnt, and Jimmy told the rest of the crew that this was Curly's fault, and now there was no way to prove his innocence. At last, Jimmy goes for the gun that Anya hid in the infirmary, and upon realizing what was gonna happen now, Curly only laughs, but Swansea wouldn't go without a fight. From this point, most of what we see is Jimmy's mind completely collapsing. First we go through a labyrinth of vents with Daisuke's Game Boy lying around. I think this is a way of Jimmy's imagining how it must have been for Daisuke entering those vents. Dark, cold and injured with no other way to go but forward, all because of him. Followed by a cemetery where he's haunted by Swansea, but in the end he is the man with the gun. Here Swansea says something about how he had an epiphany during his youth while being drunk. How he fixed his own life and got a family, but it didn't bring him joy. He at least tried to save Daisuke out of the ship, that he didn't deserve this fate, but it didn't matter now. And if this was all in Jimmy's mind, he was very aware of what he was doing. Then we see his remorse with Curly, where he force-feeds him a chunk of his own leg, symbolizing the way he forced the painkillers on him. And this in fact happened. He cut Curly's leg in a maniac attack. This is what ends up breaking him down. At last he regrets all he's done to the crew, but this wasn't over yet. The only person left was Anya, and Jimmy faces a deformed womb, using an echograph to see his unborn child, represented as a monstrous horse. The horse, now we know, is Jimmy's subconscious, because at the end it is what makes him take the final decision, taking what little remains of Curly to the cryopod. He's the only one who truly deserves to be saved, to tell the story however he chooses to, and at last takes the gun, pulls the trigger and takes his own life. That's how Mouthwashing ends. To be honest, I wouldn't have heard about this game if it wasn't for the Twitter controversy. You know how insufferable fandoms can be, and it had a very interesting story. I like how this game really uses the elements of psychological horror without over-depending on jumpscares, and I think we can get two messages out of here. That the worst moments truly get the worst out of some people, the dangers of nepotism and cutting costs, and to not get women into these kind of ships. And I mean it, there were reasons why during the colonial and the pirate era women were seen as a sign of bad luck in ships to avoid these kinds of situations. And it's all the goddamn company's fault. There are certain mental illnesses associated with spending too much time into a ship, and I'm not making this up. I'm just joking. So I hope you liked the video, and if that's the case, remember to hit a like, subscribe, and let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.